Bison Media Zone on WDAY Extra.
And welcome everybody to the new edition of the Bison Media Zone on a Valentine's Day. Jeff Kolpack back with us and dressed appropriately. I like the red.
Well, I've been accused in the past of not being festive. I don't like costume parties. I don't like those things. Maybe it's a new leaf.
Yeah,
maybe I'm moving up.
Well, you're looking good. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's to you.
No one else I'd rather spend Valentine's Day
I'm
with
sure.
than Kolpack. Lots to get to today. We'll talk some hoops coming up in our second segment. Big weekend of games for the Bison men and the Bison women in the Summit League. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. We can't go a show without chatting some football and some news there. It fears here on February 14th, the Bison football staff is finally,
They found true love. They found true love.
They have a staff completed with the hiring of Carlton Littlejohn, former Bison all-time great at linebacker, who's going to be assistant defensive line coach, another former player on the staff, and he comes, Jeff, after having 7 years of coaching experience, all the way from Jamestown to MSU to the University of Sioux Falls, an all-time Bison great that's going to help out on the defense.
I don't know how good of an assistant coach per se he is. I don't know how good he is at techniques, of course, and I've never seen him coach, and I've really not heard much about in that area. But as far as a hire, Dom, this is a home run. I mean, it is a major home run to get a former player like this, a popular former player. And again, he's not a rookie coaching.
Nope.
I mean, he's not 2 years out of college. This guy has worked his way up to start. I mean, he was at Augsburg. You start at Jamestown, then you carve your path at MSU under Steve Lockley, who knows what he's doing.
Yes.
And then, go down to Sioux Falls, which has developed into a good program. Was hired at Northern Iowa for I don't know how long, a week or two, or that's the way things go these days, I guess, in coaching. But I think the call to the alma mater and was an easy call for him. He could just go to Mark Farley and say, hey, thanks for hiring me, but the chance to go back to my alma mater is a strong deal. And we've seen this now several times.
Yep.
I mean, A.J. Blodzik goes to Wyoming for a cup of coffee.
I was like a day and a half before he got the Vanderbilt
And he goes to Vanderbilt job. This is nothing new, people. I mean, I know we talk about it because it's NDSU, but I mean, the coaching hires these days are nuts. I mean, Chip Kelly goes from the head coach at UCLA to assistant at Ohio State. Why is that? I mean, it's just usually it's the other way around.
I think,
and so everything's just topsy-turvy.
To answer that question, I'd say that's an NIL deal. UCLA's NIL is not in position where if I can go be an assistant and just worry about coaching football.
Right.
I think there's a lot of that with Matt Entz as well, frankly, on why he left to take the USC job is just to coach football and not have to worry about all the things that a college head coach has to worry about, which Tim Polassek's going to go through for the first time and is going through the first time now.
Well, Tim Polasek he's starting off with a bang.
Yeah.
They got a big soiree set up in Bismarck later this month, February 29th, is it?
Yeah, in a couple of weeks that they're going to do that.
At some bar I've never heard of on the river in Mandan, and but that's what you have to do, and that's what Craig Bolt did when he got the job, and maybe there's an element of that part of the coaching job that's been missing under Matt. That wasn't Matt's really forte.
No, that was not his forte whatsoever. And Polasek said he was going to go out, re-engage, and he said it last week, Kolpack, and we played the sound during Hot Mic about we got to get, and this I'm paraphrasing, we got to get things back to where people feel like they're missing out by not being at the Fargo Dome. And that has not been the case, I'd say, over the last 3 to 4 years inside that building.
And now that you and McFeely have taken over the marketing department in NDSU, you have all the answers. But actually, you guys have been spot on the basketball stuff. And I think football, again, this is the start of what this program needs to really put some more juice back in it. And you just can't roll out the helmets like Michael Tutsi famously said after the 39-game winning streak ended in Southern Illinois. You just can't roll out the helmets and expect people to show up, and this is what you have.
And we've gone through the litany of issues of why people haven't showed up to football games. This is the start of trying to get them back. I really believe that.
I do too.
You got to change things up, and maybe this is a way to start doing that.
And I think that everything's on the table except the intro. You got to keep that intro. That's sacred to me. I think everything else is on the table.
I agree with you. Want to also salute a guy that announced his retirement from the NFL. One of the guys we got to know really, really well. Joe Haig announced on Monday he's retiring after 7 years in the NFL, drafted by the Indianapolis Colts in 2016. a two-time All-American at North Dakota State, a 4-year starter. He started 60 games here. The first 2 years at right tackle, moved to left tackle, a walk-on from Brainerd. When we talk about all-time diamonds in the rough, this is number one in my line. This is Joe Haig.
Yeah, I don't know who else would be. Did you see that photo we had of him signing his letter of intent?
Yes.
He looked like Richie Cunningham. I mean, he looked like he was 180 pounds. And although Cody Malk, I think, would give a diamond in the rough too.
Cody's up there too. Yep.
But Joe, I don't know if injuries got the best of him later in his career. I tried to get a hold of him and never did for whatever reason. I wish he'd return my call, but that's the way it is. I think he had a concussion. Didn't play last year, and but he had a great career. I mean, signed a 1-year deal with was it Tampa Bay for $2.3 million, and that's pretty good coin for 1 year
and
for
wins
a player.
The Super Bowl and part of it blocking
6 rings,
right.
Dom. He ended his career with 6 rings, 5 titles at NDSU, and then the Super Bowl.
The thing I remember talking about before, when Chris Kleiman took over as head coach, all the transition. Billy Turner had left, who had been the mainstay for 4 years at left tackle, and they were moving Haig from right to left, and they never missed a beat with that guy at left tackle.
Yeah, and then the story I did on Joe Haig that I ran today, I guess, that I had to go through all the offensive linemen that NDSU has had in the pros, starting with Paul Kornick in 2012, and at least had a pretty decent shot at it. It took some time. I had to go, oh, I forgot about him. Oh, Dylan Raditz. Turner and Zach Johnson. I mean, it's just a line of players, and I don't think they're done yet. I think Jalen Sundell has a good chance. I think Gray Zabel has the ability.
Outstanding chance.
So I don't think the train is not done yet.
Joe, you make a great point, though, and I encourage people to look at inforum.com after we're done today of seeing that photo when he signed at Brainerd High School in 2011 to when he left NDSU in 2016. He went to the Combine, had a great Combine there, and the Colts obviously ended up drafting him. And that flexibility that he got at NDSU helped in the NFL. He played 3 different spots in the National Football League.
I was texting with his mom, Janet, a couple days ago, and she goes, I never thought that Joe had a legitimate shot at the NFL until you and I brought it up on some pregame show or something. And she thought, really?
Yeah.
He has a chance? And
pretty good one.
Being the great minds we are.
I don't know about that, but the Colts thought so. They drafted him in the 5th round back in 2016. Last before we go, encourage you to check out McFeely's podcast. He's chatting with Colorado beat writer because I think we can't talk enough, in my mind, about the lead up for this game with the Bison to open up 2024 with Deion Sanders and Colorado. Deion has filled out his staff with another NFL ties. Pat Shurmur is hired as the offensive coordinator. Shurmur, of course, was the Vikings OC prior to taking over the Giants head coaching job, and he got summarily dismissed there. There's NFL ties everywhere, and that's, again, the intriguing part about this game. It's going to be like unlike any game I think I've covered. I'm not sure about you for what we got coming in August here.
He talked with the columnist for the Denver Post, and I had some hope, and maybe it was really a fallacy of a fantasy island, that we get to talk to Deion Sanders the week of the game. But after listening to this podcast, there is 0 chance that Forum Communications will have any inkling of any comments from Coach Prime. It's shut off the general media. It's all about his video guys and his YouTube stuff and his social media, and that's the way it is. But this guy, I mean, you got to check it out on inforum.com that he called him a fraud, basically.
Yep. And that, we'll see. The talent he's stockpiled.
I'm not saying that.
You cannot deny that.
He's saying the circus of it all. The circus of it all.
We're going to have a front row seat to it.
Right.
I'll be interested, going back to your theory that you've said for 15 years about players that just overlook North Dakota State, if that happens again with Deion Sanders and this season opening game.
Yeah, it's a trap game. There's no doubt. It will be
Nebraska the following week on the road.
It will be a big trap game, and I've said it every time. Bison are 9-3 against the FBS, or 9-4 now.
9-4 with a loss to Arizona.
9-4 against the FBS. All 9 wins. They all North Dakota.
Yep.
Wait, where is that?
To me, this boils right down to that. I mean, Shadur Sanders, Travis Hunter, you've got Deion Sanders. They're looking at way bigger things in the season.
At least those
game.
guys have been in the FCS, though. That may be a little difference.
I just don't think Deion's getting his guys geeked up for NDSU, which will be awfully intriguing when we get to see it come up here on August 31. We'll break. We come back. We'll take a look at some basketball. The Bison men on the road. The Bison women back home. They were road warriors last week, winning 3 games. We'll visit about that when the Bison Media Zone returns on WDAY Extra right after this. We welcome you back here on the Bison Media Zone on WDAY Extra. An up-to-date look at the Summit League men's basketball standings heading in. We have 3 weeks to go in the regular season. You covered this league as long as I have. Have you ever seen it as convoluted, as jumbled as this?
Parody.
Yeah, right?
I hate that word,
I know.
but it actually applies in this case, and it's a result of the transfer portal. A lot of good players left, and it leaves teams, the best teams maybe strip down a player or two and gives everybody else a shot.
Bison went from 8th to 4th, Jeff, with 2 wins. And they could very well, if they lose both this weekend, could very well go back to 8th this time next week.
Well, and then, they could win a title, too.
Right. They could win, too.
They still have South Dakota State at home. They have North Dakota at home.
Correct.
So, there's some scheduling things in their favor.
And St. Thomas at home. All 3 of the top teams, all are coming to Fargo still.
But have to split. Have to at least split this weekend.
Andrew Morgan was a man. It was his best week as a Bison this past week. Had 31 points in the win against Kansas City. Had 18 against Denver. That's the kind of potential that we've seen flashes over the last 3 years. It came home to roost last past week.
I think he finally finished at a consistent basis. There's some times this year where he's been near the rim and just hasn't been able to finish some shots, and maybe that affected him after that. I think that and he's been able to at least be a threat at the three-point line, as we see there. But that's a strong move, and he finished there. And there's some times that he didn't do that this year, and I think maybe this is a good time. And you're 6'10", fella, dunk it.
Yep. Pairing him with Feddersen as well, and with seeing what Noah's done over the last, I think, 2 months, that is no one else has that in the league. 2 6'10" guys and go out, shoot the 3, and also finish at the rim. That's what's got to make Dave really excited about what could happen.
Noah Feddersen, and I thought he had the ability early in the year, and he's really developed like we had hoped, or the Bison had hoped we would see. And so I like a guy, like a 6'10". It's a perimeter game. I mean, it's a 3-point game. You can't have 2 guys on the blocks, and the fact that Noah can hit the 3 is a huge deal.
Now, it's Tulsa and Oral Roberts tomorrow night. It's not the same ORU team, but they're still dangerous. We saw that game play out here. And then the game at Denver, which I think if the Bison had that one back, boy, they badly won. That was a game they had the lead in late and saw Denver come back and win.
Oral Roberts is a tough place to play for whatever
Tulsa's
reason.
Really
it's just different atmosphere. They have 3 veteran players, man. Kareem Thompson's been around since 2012. I mean, all those guys. It's just been, and those are a very veteran 3. Losing Max Asmus obviously is a huge deal.
I mean, Isaac McBride's still there. Weaver, Thompson. They gave South Dakota State all they wanted for the Jacks pulled away and won that game in Brookings. This is like you said, you split here, boy, you got to feel pretty good knowing 3 of the last 4 games are in Fargo.
And I think NDSU's playing better defense lately, a little more Dave Richmond-like.
I threw this out at Dave, and he got mad at me. But
what do you say?
They haven't allowed. I gave him the announcer jinx. They have not allowed 80 points in a game in 3.5 weeks.
Oh, so ORU is going to score 95.
But that's why they're winning. They haven't. No team has crossed 80 against them since they lost to Omaha back in the middle of January.
And I questioned whether they had the ability to defend, and obviously they've answered that with the ability to defend.
Meanwhile, on the women's side, the Bison are back home after a 3-0 road trip. You look at the up-to-date standings. They are 2 games clear of Oral Roberts, who's here tomorrow night. This is the best start the Bison women have ever had in the Division I era.
Yeah, they've had 3 other times where they were 7-3, but this feels a little different.
Yes, it does.
Being 8-2, and they could really, I think, put a dent in everybody else and almost not solidify the second spot, but really, I think, be a major factor, and nobody's going to catch that. Number 2 is huge.
Yes,
That's
it
big.
is.
Because you get that day off, and you get the better bracketing, and I think a number 2 seed would be a major deal for NDSU.
Now, granted, they went through that last year. They were the 2 and lost in the opening round, but this is a different team, and it goes to the point of what they did on the road, Jeff. They won at UND. They won at Kansas City. They won at Omaha.
3 in a row.
On Saturday. 2 of those spots they lost last year that all automatically that sets them up as a different team in my mind.
You look at this video, you know what I like about this team? Look at the empty chairs at the end of the bench. I like 10 players. I do. I love 10 players on a team.
Jory Collins like 10 players.
Well, if everybody's healthy, he does. But I like that in the fact that in this day and age, and I talked to Jory about this in the story on inform.com today, that I like the fact that you don't have these people at the end of the bench sulking. I mean, players are growing up and brought up these days in AAU being stars, and they don't come here to sit on the bench. And then it's hard to find a player who go, I'll wait 2 years and I'll be patient. It's hard to find that player. Jory said that. Now, he would like maybe have 13. If you could make 10 or 11 work, I think that's preferable. If I had a softball team, I'd want 14. I want 9 players, a couple utility, and then rest pitchers. If I'm, I like that fact in this day and age. And the transfer portal, I mean, you can leave whenever you want, and you don't have to wait a year or sit out a year. That makes a difference in this. And so I think maybe 12 players.
You wrote this because they walked that fine line this weekend.
They're a tighter team because of that.
But they had foul trouble this weekend. That's the thing. Nobody can get hurt, and you can't foul out. That's the fine line you walk at 10 right now.
I mean, 4 players are probably not going to foul out, Tom.
But they came awfully close this weekend. But your point is well taken. I think in this day and age, Division I women's basketball, you can have 15. I don't know. Many teams
you can have 15.
Go 15 anymore.
Well, players 13 through 15 has zero chance of reaching the floor.
Right.
And if you're redshirting, that's one thing, and that's because you're not playing, and then you have a little different attitude about it. But if you're on the bench and you have no chance of playing, are you working hard in practice? Do you really care?
Right.
Those are legitimate questions in this day and age. Now, in the 80s, 90s, 2015, before the portal, maybe you had players willing to say, okay, I'm going to keep working and I'm going to have a good attitude. And 2 years ago, the Bison did not have good attitudes. They did not.
No. And they didn't have as good of players as they have right now. Elle Evans is playing. I know her past weekend was quiet. If I was having a ballot right now, she's player of the year in my mind for what she's leading in category-wise, what she means. If you take Evans off the Bison, how many games have they won? Maybe 4 in conference. Half, if that.
And that's a legitimate criteria for player of the year or MVP. And again, she's so versatile, but her length, and she's developing the ability to get to the rim. That's another deal because players are going to come out on her, and now you got to hope you hold on to her after the season.
That's a whole other conversation we'll have when the season is done. If they sweep this weekend, the Bison are 10-2. Is that enough to get people to start raising their all right, hey, Bison women got something going?
You talk about attendance?
Yes.
I don't know if that.
It always goes back to attendance with me.
I know. I just don't know if you're going to get 5,000. You're not.
You're not going to get 5 for the women's
4,000,
no.
and that's a issue that needs to be addressed in the off season by the administration. And you and Mike have laid it out. I don't need to repeat it. But that letter to that Mike printed was spot on, in my opinion, on several facets. Again, nothing can be off the table. Nothing.
Don't forget, we'll have coverage all weekend long. Bison women tomorrow night against Oral Roberts. We hit the air at 7 o'clock on WDAY Extra. It's 2nd and 3rd in the Summit League. Should be a great game. Bison lost to ORU when they played in Tulsa earlier this year. Now the rematch coming up tomorrow night. Then we're back with you on Saturday at 1 for NDSU and Denver. One note as well, if you need some afternoon viewing, Bison softball team has 10th ranked Duke today. That's a good challenge for Darren Mueller's team coming up later today. Thanks for coming by. Happy Valentine's Day.
You as well.
Good to see Jeff Kolpack joining us here on the Bison Media Zone. If you missed any of the show, you can podcast it later today at inform.com. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week on the BMZ at 10:30 on WDAY Extra.